Hello, everybody. How are you? My name is Ben, and this is what my hair is doing today. I never quite know what it's going to do, but this is what's happening today. So I'm not. Just a quick segue. I'm not. I'm not growing it, but I'm not going to the barbers. I'm just sort of seeing what happens. I have grown it before. It's been nipple length before my hair, and I don't think we'll get to that stage of Alanis Morissette thank you music video levels. But yes, we shall see. So here we are. It is the end of August, and I have read 6 books, all fiction books, and I'm going to talk about them. So the first book that I read in August of 2020 was The White Tiger. This is by Aravind Adiga. So this won the Booker Prize, which was then the Man Booker Prize in, I think it was 2008. But yes, so I read this, and this is pretty fabulous. It's a very kind of tense, gripping story about a young man who is trying to transcend his predetermined destiny. So it follows Balram, who is this young man who is born in very, very, very poverty-stricken circumstances in this small village in India. And it's the kind of place where everyone kind of knows where you're going to end up. You sort of, if you're lucky, you go to school, but usually you'll just end up working for the family in any kind of job that you can. And a sort of prestigious job for someone in his family in his village is working as a servant for someone who's quite wealthy, and that's what Balram ends up doing. He ends up being a driver / servant for this quite wealthy landowner. Balram, he kind of gets it into his head that he's sort of destined for greater things, and throughout the novel is I never know how to pronounce this word, an epistolary novel. So it's letters that he's writing to, I think, this Chinese dignitary or someone, kind of explaining how he kind of made it as an entrepreneur, sort of thing. But at the beginning of the novel, it's sort of made clear that he's made it through very, very disreputable and quite brutal means. So he ends up being a driver / servant for this quite wealthy landowner, seeing how the upper class kind of works and how it kind of really exploits servants and people around him, and the kind of the political dealings that happen and stuff. It's a very, very high stakes novel, but it is really kind of believable and not kind of far fetched at all. Even though the plot is quite sort of far fetched, it doesn't seem far fetched. It seems very, very believable, and in that sense, it's really, really gripping and quite kind of like tense and stuff. Also, I mean, you can sort of see it as a comment on capitalism, and the kind of what cost by getting ahead quite far. What cost is that to other people, particularly, Balram, his the way he kind of gets ahead is at great cost. Excuse me. It's at great cost not only to his employer but also to his family as well. It's kind of like, so yeah, I really enjoyed it. I thought it was really, really fabulous. Very, very tense read. A very kind of interesting look at India, because I think it's set in sort of present day, around sort of early 2000s, I think, in India, and just it's fascinating to sort of read about a community, a society, and it's been written with a lot of detail. It's just really, really interesting, fascinating, and very, very gripping. So I would thoroughly recommend it. Some people thought that Adiga or Adiga, he's got a novel out. He had a novel out recently, and some people thought that he would be longlisted for the Booker Prize this year, but obviously that did not happen. But yeah, I would be very interested to read another one of his books, because I thought this one, as I say, was really, really well. It was just really, really well done. It was a gripping kind of story and quite kind of like, ugh! So yeah, definitely a recommend. So the next book I read was Mr. Loverman by Bernadine Evaristo. They've recently republished a lot of her back catalogue in kind of like a similar sort of design as Girl, Woman, Other. And I was kind of interested to read some of her other work, because I did like Girl, Woman, Other. And of all the books that have been published, this one kind of stood out. I was sort of like interested by the sort of the premise and the characters of it. And anyone who sort of talked about it has really liked it. And I really liked it. I really like this novel. So it follows Barrington Walker, who is a man who moved to England from Antigua with his wife when they were kind of just married in their early 20s. He is now in his 70s, and he has throughout the whole of his married life, he has been having an affair with his best friend Morris. So Barrington is actually a gay man who's been having this affair with Morris, and the book opens with him sort of finally deciding to leave his wife Carmel and to be with Morris, and to kind of sort of come clean about everything. So at the start of the novel, most of the book is first person from Barrington, or Barry, and we see that his wife Carmel is really, she's very religious, and she's very controlling. She's very angry. She's a little bit violent. So right from the off, we're kind of on Barrington's side. It's like, oh right, he's sort of stuck in this nasty marriage, and he's repressed and everything. He's got to get out. However, Bernadine Evaristo is a very clever writer, and she knows how to write nuanced characters. And Carmel, there are a few chapters which are from her perspective, and they are in the second person, which I was quite surprised by. But yeah, so her chapters are in the second person, and they're kind of more flashbacks to like the beginning of the marriage, kind of moving forward. And you kind of realise gradually that she's kind of like the only way that she could be, given the circumstances that she's been in. And I ended up feeling really quite sort of sorry for her, obviously, because Barrington was the first man that she ever sort of fell in love with, and to be in a marriage for that long and to know that something's right, because she sort of assumes that he's sleeping around with other women, which isn't true. It's sort of half true. He's just sleeping around with another man. I think no one gets away with anything in this novel, which I really liked. Yeah, I just really liked the nuance of the book, and the style of it. It was kind of everything that I liked about Girl, Woman, Other condensed into a very simple story. With the story, I mean, at the beginning of the novel, you're sort of presented with the characters, and from the premise of what the book is, you can kind of, it's not too difficult to kind of join the dots to what you think the plot is going to be, and what kind of the big beats of the plot are going to be. And I don't think you would be too far off if you were to sort of predict what's going to happen in the book. I don't think you'd be too far off. But the book's strengths lie in its characters and in the way that it's written, and just the complexities of it all. I really appreciated it, and I thought it was very well written, and very well done. So yes, a big recommend. Also, speaking about Girl, Woman, Other, it's going to be interesting, I think, to reread that again when I eventually do, because YouTube, in its kind of eternal wisdom, decided to recommend me a video by, is it Books with Lanes? So she did this kind of very acerbic takedown of Girl, Woman, Other, sort of criticising it and stuff. And I watched the video, and I wouldn't go so far as to say that I agreed with everything, but I was just interested in some of the points that she raised, because there are some sort of questionable things about Girl, Woman, Other, and yeah, it'll be interesting to sort of, on a reread, to see whether some things kind of stand up on a second read. Yeah, I just thought it was interesting. If you had problems with Girl, Woman, Other, you didn't like the style of it, you didn't like the kind of multi-narrated thing, then I would recommend this, because it was sort of everything that I liked about Will Another, but in a very, very simple plot with very, very good characters. Flawed characters, you know. So yes, I recommend it. My neighbours, well, a couple of houses down, they've cut down this massive tree, and it's sort of left this sort of gaping hole, you know. And I can't help feeling, I mean, I had no sort of attachment to that tree at all, but I can't help feeling like it's the end of the cherry orchard, you know. Okay, so I made a big old video about this book, Jane Eyre by Charlotte Bronte. I love this book. I really, really love this book. The impression I got of Jane Eyre as a character before I read this book was that she was like plain Jane. And if you see sort of, I haven't seen any sort of film adaptations, but if you see like stills of it, all the actors that play Jane Eyre, they always look kind of the same. They always sort of look like, you know, they've always got like a harsh. They always look like that, and so yeah, I sort of got the impression of kind of like a meek, quite sort of morose character, but that's not the case at all. I mean, Jane Eyre, she is sort of poised, and she's reserved, and she knows not to kind of like, you know, raise her voice or anything. But I mean, she is feisty, and she knows how to, you know, say stuff back. If someone's saying something nasty to her, she knows how to say something not nasty back, but she knows how to defend herself. And she's a really, really strong, just a really, really strong character. Obviously very, very deeply moral, which kind of gets in the way of certain things. But yeah, I was just so like impressed by it, and I just loved the character of Jane Eyre a lot. Also, I loved the story. I mean, like, I only really knew certain things about the plot. You know, that there was a scary thing in the attic and all the rest of it. But I didn't really know anything too kind of spoilery about it. So reading it for the first time, I was really kind of like, so in terms of other novels, I mean, I've read Wuthering Heights, and so now I've got, I've got it here. I've got, I bought this from a second-hand shop, so I've got Tenant of Wildfell Hall to read, and then some people have recommended that I read Villette by Charlotte Bronte, so I think, so yeah, I'm going to be interested to read another one by Charlotte Bronte. I think Villette, from what I've heard, is more depressing, but still, I mean, this is fabulous. If you have not read it, then read it. It's really accessible. It's, as a classic, I mean, as a 19th century classic, it's just really, really accessible, and very, very twisty-turny in the plot, and the characters are fabulous. Jane Eyre, she is one cool person. Next up, I read The Enlightenment of the Greengage Tree by Shokoofeh Azar. Ooh, so this, of course, was shortlisted for. Sorry, this was shortlisted for the International Booker Prize, and according to a lot of people assumed this might win. This was kind of a big, I guess, shoo-in to win the International Booker Prize. But as we all know, the Discomfort of Evening won. But we'll get to all that. So yes, this is by Shokoofeh Azar. It was originally written in Persian. It's been translated anonymously, and this is for safety reasons, I believe. So it's set in Iran, kind of in the 80s, and it's set after the Iranian Revolution, and it follows a family of 5, and it kind of follows how all the kind of political sort of oppressionness kind of affects this family. But at the beginning of the novel, there's an enlightenment and there's a death in the family, and the novel sort of goes on from there. Now, this is a magic realism novel, very much in the style of 100 Years of Solitude. So if you've read 100 Years of Solitude, then you know it's very much in that kind of vein. And 100 Years, 100 Years of Solitude, um, it's very much, this book is very much inspired by that book and has a reverence to it as well. I mean, it's mentioned a couple of times as well. I don't know why my throat is so dry. So the narrator is the ghost of the daughter of this family. So she has been killed, and she is narrating the story of the family. And it kind of talks about the political unrest and the oppressive nature of the new sort of government, I guess, with this very, very heavy wash of magical realism. I had sort of mixed feelings about this book as I was reading it. I remember getting over kind of just over halfway and thinking, I'm not really, enjoying it as much as I want to, and that was just because all of the kind of fantastical elements. There's like something like that on every single page, and not only that. I mean, the bits that I loved were when we sort of focus on the family more and the members of the family, but there's a lot of kind of like sidestepping to other characters and other kind of like village members or politicians and stuff. And whilst again, like the imagery and sort of the storytelling of what's happening to those people, sort of weird thing that happens to those people, is interesting, and it's sort of written. It's beautifully written and translated, obviously, but I just got a bit like, oh, I don't know, I'm just a bit sort of tired by it. However, by the end, I was kind of won over again because there's a section where the father goes back to Tehran, the capital, and the sort of the magical realism sort of is sort of stripped away, and you're sort of faced with the kind of the reality. So yeah, the ending I thought was so just really, really powerful and very kind of moving. It's quite a horrible, brutal sort of murder towards the end as well, which I wasn't. But again, it's through this kind of magical realism wash, but it's still kind of like, because it's all symbolic, isn't it? So yes, I was like, yeah, I read it and I was like, yeah, this is probably going to win. The only other book I'd read was Hurricane Season, and I thought that might win, but for other sort of different reasons. Hurricane Season is kind of really, really violent and brutal and has all sorts of horrible things in it, but legitimately so. And I thought that it might win. But I was sort of thinking, yeah, I think this is going to win. So when The Discomfort of Evening won, I was kind of surprised, even though I haven't read it. But from what I've heard from most people on BookTube, they've had problems with it. Some people haven't, but yeah, The Guardian describes it as a scatological novel, and I'm sure, and I know it's like it's to do with grief and stuff from what I've heard. But yeah, I'm not overly interested in reading it, unless someone persuades me otherwise. But yeah, an interesting choice. But I would very much recommend this book. As I say, I have sort of mixed feelings about it. Overall, I think it's very, very well written and very, very powerful. I just kind of there was a section of it where I was like, okay, I'm a bit over all this magic realism stuff, but I can definitely see why it's there, and yeah, it's a recommend. So there. How on earth does one talk about this book? I read Orlando by Virginia Woolf. So the only other Virginia Woolf novel I've read is The Waves, and I think years and years ago I tried to read Mrs. Dalloway, but it didn't really work. This was a very sort of spur of the moment, I'm going to read Orlando moment. And I'm very glad I did. However, I don't know how I'm going to talk about it here. Yes, so it's about Orlando, who begins his life in Elizabethan times, and he's he gets sort of spotted by Elizabeth I, and he becomes like a nobleman. He's very, very rich. He kind of and he's got amazing legs. He's got some fantastic pair of legs. I think it's more or less a sort of a meaning of life type thing. He's sort of he goes through life and he sort of falls in love with various people, and he becomes sort of fascinated with various different writers, sort of very sort of famous writers, and he wants to write, he wants to write himself, and so he begins this big old epic poem called The Oak Tree. And as the novel sort of progresses, you realise that he sort of evades time, as you realise that kings and queens are kind of sort of come and go, and you realise that he's actually sort of living more or less the same age but over time. And then sort of halfway, maybe just before halfway in the book, Orlando wakes up as a woman. Yes, and then she kind of goes through life as a woman and falls in love, and there's just so many. I mean, I can see why it's so kind of talked about and studied, because even as a woman, she likes to kind of play around with stuff. So she might sort of walk down the street as a man or in male clothing, and she falls in love with men and women and stuff. The novel kind of ends in 1928, when the novel was published. So Orlando has lived for a few hundred years and tried to sort of find, the meaning and stuff in her life. On a very sort of basic level, I enjoyed it. I thought it was very, very interesting. But it is very, very dense, and there are sort of topics and themes that are discussed in the novel, which I'm going to leave others to talk about with more authority. But yes, just as a regular punter, I enjoyed it, and I'm interested to read. I need to read Mrs. Dalloway next. I really need to read Mrs. Dalloway. Is that all I have to say? Is that all I have to say about it? I feel a bit sheepish. I wish I could sort of say something like, "Oh yes, well, this is the novel that really I remember," but I can't. I'm just like, I'm so inept. I'm inept. Forgive me, BookTube. Yeah, I just need to sit with it more, and yeah, it's a very, very interesting one. Right, last of all. Right, okay, so a few weeks ago now, Kieran at Katie Books, he was talking about The Little Friend by Donna Tartt, and that is a novel that I have not read in a decade, in like over a decade. And I was like, ooh, I want to revisit The Little Friend by Donna Tartt, because I remember when I consider myself to be a bit of a Donna Tartt fan, and I remember when I read that novel, I had a sort of major problems with it. Like, I thought it was a little bit boring, and I didn't really couldn't really get through it. So I was like, I'm going to revisit The Little Friend. But before I do that, I want to kind of get into Donna Tartt's work a little bit more. I want to read like a novel of hers that I really, really like. So I read The Secret History. I don't think it's been 10 years since I've read it. Well, it might have been. I mean, I really can't remember when the last time I read this was, but it's been a long time. As you can see, this is quite a, for want of a better expression, a well-thumbed, I hate that expression, copy. I've had this for years and years and years. So this used to be my favourite book. When I was kind of late teens, early 20s, I would have classed this as my favourite novel. I used to absolutely love it. Yeah, I used to absolutely love it, and I to the point where I really wanted to play Henry in a film adaptation. I'm not castable as Henry at all. No, I'm not castable as Henry. So yeah, but I really, really loved it. And so I was like, oh well, reread Secret History. I didn't. First of all, I forgot how long it is. This is 660 pages. So Secret History. So if you don't know. This is a suspense novel. It's a kind of murder. It's not a murder mystery, but it's not a whodunit. It's a whydunit. So right at the beginning of the book, you are told who has been killed and by whom. So we know exactly kind of who gets murdered and who does it. And the rest of the book is basically detailing why that murder took place and then the aftermath. It's such a peculiar book, this. It's such a peculiar story. I'd forgotten a lot of things. I'd forgotten a lot of things that happen in the second half, kind of in the aftermath bits. I sort of forgotten how much the characters kind of unravel. And I'd forgotten just the kind of the melancholic tone of the book. I finished it and I was so kind of depressed. It's a really depressing book. I love it a lot, but it is a very, very depressing book. So it was a fascinating reread. This was because I haven't read it for ages, and now I am in my mid-30s. It does strike me as a novel that is perfect for your 20s. I think it's a novel perfect for any time of your life, but I think it's a novel perfect for your 20s. And not just because, it was written, I think she was 29 when it was published. It's about characters in their 20s. Not just that, but just I think there's just something about it that struck me reading it now. I was like, yeah, I can see why I loved this when I was like 20 or 21 or something. So I can see why some people have problems with this book, because the characters as people, I mean, they're really unlikable people. However, I would argue that they're very engaging characters. I really enjoyed kind of meeting these characters again, and yeah, I was just very kind of gripped by it, and I sort of forgot just how sad really the sort of the last act of it is. I've sort of been sitting with this now. I sort of finished it earlier today, and I've been sitting with it, sort of thinking like. But I'm really, really glad I reread it. I really, really love it. If you haven't read it, then I would very much recommend it. Yeah, I forgot how long it was. Flipping heck. So I think I'm ready now to read. Well, next month sometime, I will be ready to reread The Little Friend. I don't think I'll read The Goldfinch this year. I think, because that's 800 pages. So there we go. So there's what I read in the month of August. Yeah, all of them recommends. All of them were pretty good. So next up, and I've got them here. Next month, I want to start on David Copperfield. It's high time. I haven't read a Dickens this year. It's been over a year since I've read a Dickens, so I'm sort of ready for David Copperfield. But flipping heck, I mean, it's 908 pages, but so that might take up most of September. But we shall see. Someone's drilling. Yeah, so I'm going to be reading David Copperbread next month, and we'll see what else I squeeze in. So there we go, and here we are, and I hope everyone is all right, and I shall see you next time in whatever configuration of video that might be. So yes, bye-bye.